Good morning. Thanks. Quite the stage was set in that presentation. We joked as we walked up, everybody's thinking about that, so the pressure's off on us. There will be a lot of discussion around AI and agents. We're going to try to keep things in a little bit more of a pragmatic and practical sense, thinking about terms from practitioners implementing MES and share some experience. As I prepared for this, I was thinking, how do you talk to a room full of experts and practitioners and providers in this space? It's a very niche, excellent conference, my second time here. I'm excited to be here. The way I'm thinking about this is, we're seeing MES has been around a long time. There's a lot of expertise and knowledge built in this room, right? And a lot of that was earned through hard work, persistence, projects, kind of like the learnings that you gain through that. Things like we just saw are rapidly changing how everything about this space will come together, be used, leveraged, applied in operations, right? So one of the risks I think we see is that knowledge, that basis, that foundation that you bring to the table can almost be your own worst enemy. We have some preconceived notions, we have ideas. This is what we build as practitioners into our plans, into our approach, into our progress that could be leaving opportunity on the table. So we're going to talk through a couple of the myths that we live through as the people that do this kind of the implementations and then use them in real life, and try to break that down a little bit and see how do these things apply and if there's changes that we need to make throughout this. So, to start, I'd like to introduce the panelists here that we brought. We have two end users, Ryan Rapoza, Senior Manager from Moderna. Although you want to take a second to introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, welcome. Thanks, everyone. My name is Ryan Rapoza, Senior Manager of Global Drug Substance Digital Operations for Moderna. Been in that role for about 2 years, been with the company for 6, so seen it from the bottom to the top.
Great. I also have a colleague with me, AJ Ward. He's from our North Carolina office, Program Manager in MES Deliveries, please.
Yeah, AJ Ward, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having us up here. I work under John, working through our MES group down in the Southeast.
And last, or finally here, we have Isabelle Sumera, who is the Associate Director of Digital Operations at Elevatebio.
Hi everyone, I'm Isabelle Sumera. I lead the automation and MES teams at Elevatebio. We've been using Apprentice for a few years, so glad to be here to talk about it.
And I forgot to mention myself, I'm John Vargo. I'm the Director of MES and Digital Transformation Center of Excellence for Rovisys, a global system integrator provider. And thank you, Apprentice, for the mention there. We're very excited about this kind of technology. As a personal and professional practitioner of AI and really pushing towards this into our work. It's near and dear to my heart. I'm sure there's a lot of interest, intrigue, and questions around this. We're here today and tomorrow. I'd be happy to have discussions about that as well. So thanks. All right, so enough from me. I'd like to hand it over to the panel now. So first we're going to start with the common kind of myth that a lot of folks see from, history, your track record. It takes years to see value, right? Ryan, you have some experience under your belt getting started. Why don't you speak to that and kind of explain how that has affected you and how you've worked through that?
Yeah, no, thank you. So at Moderna, our kind of opening into working with Apprentice was tackling what I'm sure everyone in the room that's used paper logbooks looks like, is really how do we get paper off of the floor? How do we turn it into a digital system so that data can be quickly accessed, real-time reviewed, and kind of minimize impact downstream? So we started with one of our biggest paper drivers, when that's our clean room cleanings. So we migrated those into Apprentice, into eLogs, and what was interesting with this project was while we were implementing an MES system alongside of it, we were also revamping our process in general. So we hit a few spots where we thought we were code locked, we weren't code locked, and in previous experience, what would have taken another 3 to 4 weeks to reconfigure, retest, we were able to streamline that with Apprentice and got those down to about a week of reconfiguration. So when it all said and done, we had code lock, and within a month and a half later, after a few reconfigurations, we were live on the floor. We removed all of our paper logbooks from the floor. And then the value we see here is with real-time review and real-time data analysis, we're preventing things that weren't identified until later on downstream. So really minimizing impact, minimizing deviations, minimizing rework from the teams, and to ensure a right first-time manufacture.
Great. Great. In our discussions, you had mentioned it is a relatively narrow scope that you started with. How would that work out? Did that affect you well? Do you think that was a good path forward?
Yeah, I think going narrow was actually the key to kind of a successful launch. A lot of times you go big and you do a whole end-to-end process. It's a new system. There's a lot of unfamiliarity with it. Change management can only go so far. So really driving the end user to be the forefront. I heard it before, but business-led, right? So working with the business to determine that that workflow is what's needed, meets the needs of them, it works the way they want it. There's no unexpected kind of things that happen in the background that don't necessarily follow suit. So starting small, starting narrow, and really building the trust with the end user that the system does what they're expected, and we're not just throwing another system at them to document. So it's really important, start narrow, show success in one field, and then migrate that out and deploy further.
Right. The more the iterative build rather than the
Yep.
super big bang thing.
Yep.
Isabelle, AJ, anything you want to chime in or add to that?
Said it really well.
Yeah, I mean, I support the approach. That's generally what we recommend. It keeps people engaged in the short term, and then it pays off long term when you get to build on that.
Great. Okay. Kind of continuing on here, the next topic we were going to bring up for AJ to talk about a little bit here is, should an MES do everything? For a long time, I think the development path of technology has been to put more and more tools in more and more places to get to that one, single pane of glass, kind of single user interface. I think as we will start to see, maybe that experience for operations and practitioners changes, right? So is that still part of the right direction that we want to go?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think yes. I think there's value in putting more functions in the same system. There is efficiencies to be gained. There are efficiencies to be gained when the operator is, say, used to the interface. They're used to the navigation. I'm talking too loud. They're used to how to work it within the system. They can get more value out of it over time. I think where we see challenges with that, certainly I've seen recently on a project, we've seen challenges with that because people maybe are trying to shove a square peg into a round hole, and they should be prioritizing doing things correctly, doing things in a way that works for their processes, that works for their people, works for their business. Ideally, that's in the same system and they can build up to that place. But I think there's a balance there, right? And you have to kind of look at your individual situation and plan not just for the next year, the next project, the next deployment, but the next set, the next phase, the next generation, I guess, of integrations.
Okay, good. I think it's not only technology, right? Do they fit? Ryan, I think you mentioned it, that you looked inward at your process, your operation, and found opportunities to adapt it, right? But not just for the system's sake, right? For the improvements of that. Anything you want to add or chime in there?
No, I think what's key is kind of what's available, don't overdo it. And then kind of set yourself up for the future. So what data is available, use it, and build around it. It doesn't need to have everything, like you said. But yeah, I mean, looking at where we could improve, how can we prevent a delay? How do we get the eyes on it right ahead of time was key.
Great, okay. Isabelle, anything to add?
Sorry, nothing else.
That's okay.
They said it all
No,
well.
you're great. Okay, well, I am going to turn to you next.
Yeah.
So you have an interesting story. You've been through a lot, and from your program from day one, right? And you were part of the initial team that sourced and planned the project that you went down, right? You've been through a story, a journey with that, and I think a lot of us can can relate to, the love-hate side of things that we talked about this morning. There's a lot to be said about that. You see a lot of benefit, but you've learned a lot as you've gone through that, right? The question or the myth is, when we think about this, setting out for a project, we're often aiming at the finish line. What's the go live date? When are we going to get there? What's all the boxes we got to check and the work we got to prepare for to get to that? But I think we all know, and most of you as well, that is not at all the finish line, right? Can you speak to your experience on that kind of scenario and what comes after the first big bang?
Yeah, I think when you see new technology, right, it's really exciting, it's shiny, you want to have it yesterday, right? But then you go live and you have to live with it. And at the end of the day, manufacturing has the best intents, but where there's a will, there's a way. They'll find ways to break things, they'll do things and accidentally expose bugs. We were one of the earlier adopters of Apprentice. I think it was really exciting to deploy new technology, but also we realized the risk of a bug that's a showstopper, not just an annoyance, was a real possibility. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just planning for go live, but also planning for what you do afterwards. What are you going to do if something happens? Because you do as much testing, you want that risk to be low, but it's not zero.
Right. Yep.
It can happen.
So really that being prepared for what happens after the event, right? Big component of change management. I'm sure a lot of organizations now are actively, I would say 5 years ago, that term was loosely heard. Now it's fundamental, and we hear it a lot, right? Is what is the impact to your operation, your team, your organization? So anything that you specifically call out that helped in that process in hindsight, with communication plans or anything around that side of things that you mentioned?
Yeah, clear communication is key to everything, managing expectations. A lot of people have already mentioned it. As long as you have strong partners in manufacturing, MSAT, and quality, they can certainly help smooth some of the ruffled feathers, but also help you build a path towards making the system work for you. Because obviously you can have the technology, but you have to have a use case for using it, and your users need to like it. They need to enjoy using it. And so to be fair, we liked some things of it, but we had a lot of challenges.
Right, yep. Okay, yeah, please. I think this is one of the biggest areas of interest in real life MES implementation, right? Is what happens to maintain, sustain, and keep it pushing over the line. Do you want to add anything?
One thing that kind of helped us too, and I know a lot of people probably felt this, but a lot of times it's the implementing team that kind of falls on the sword, right? So if something goes wrong, all eyes are on us for the implementing team. What's really important is always kind of having those change agents that are associated with your change, right? So people that know the system, that are there from day one and help you build it. That way, when something does happen on the floor, it's not solely directed to the change team. And there's other people that can help you work through it and then escalate it if it is an actual configuration issue. Because just like anything else, once one project implements, that team's moving on to the next project. So ensuring that you have enough of a team that understands what you implemented, how it works, what the development behind it looks like is crucial, and not just being a standalone digital implementation team. So always partnering with the business to ensure that smooth transition onto the floor.
Yeah. Great, yeah, absolutely.
I can echo that as well. I'm certainly an engineer through and through, and unfortunately that means I have a tendency to think that I'm right and I know best all the time. But every time we go through one of these projects where we're rolling out a factory-wide or a site-wide MES, you have to have those people from the business, from operations on the floor, because we're promising that when you get the system, you're going to have a better time executing and reviewing batch records. It's going to be smoother, it's more efficient, you're going to make so much more money, stuff like that. But none of that is true if it doesn't get used, and ultimately it's the operators and the quality teams who actually have to use it. So if they're not bought in, how can we possibly realize those goals, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, that kind of leads right into the myth that is rapidly being debunked, I think, by a lot of places, and we'll hear a lot about it here today and tomorrow too, but the idea that MES projects are an IT project, right? Certainly a partner, certainly a lot of the heavy lifting works through them, of course. But that said, that's not really the true nature of that, right? Isabelle, is there anything you can kind of weigh in on your experience around that and how partnered and worked with between the teams that were responsible and took over?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge for IT departments. How do you deploy new technology and make sure that the users are invested in it, right? I think for our MES project, we certainly had buy-in, but perhaps we could have had stronger buy-in, stronger support. It's certainly there, but I think to carry it to the finish line and living with it, it would have helped work through some of the challenges that we had. I'll give an example. Unfortunately, it's not an MES. It was a LIMS implementation, but that user group, they were really lobbying for this software that they had used previously. We basically had a built-in group of super users just waiting for us to implement the system for them. It was the fastest implementation and the greatest adoption from day one. And so they really ran with it, and they have a whole roadmap for implementing more things for that system. So it just goes to show that like you really need the business partnership from the start. Everyone touched on it, right? You need quality to challenge some of these things that said like, we got to do this. But if they look back at regulation and they're like, no, actually it's a gray area. It's really open for interpretation and we don't need that. And then for manufacturing, obviously operators come in day out for their shift, do their work, but you need that manufacturing champion to say, we can do things a different way. And that can help you chart the course for your project and what you implement day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that point, how do you make decisions on what can be adapted, what can be changed, kind of to Helen and Michelle's presentation earlier, how do you streamline and compress out some of the extra that isn't necessarily always a quality decision, right? It can't be decided by an IT team. Maybe it'll be decided by agents soon, but for now, it's going to take the operations involvement, operations quality, and the teams that have to own and be accountable to what the results are, right? You guys have anything you want to, how was your experience with your deployments in that partnering?
Yeah, so for us, our obviously quality approval on it, but nothing was locked until business approved of the workflow. They tested them. They went end to end. It was not a digital enablement. We obviously at a high level, from a top-down perspective, want to see how do we streamline and kind of enhance our technology and grow. But you have to go from the bottom up as well. So understanding what they need and keeping them along for the ride. So they were, in Isabelle's case, the same thing, where they were excited now to get into this digital system rather than having to bring a paper logbook, find the paper logbook for the room they're in, right? So they were behind it, so they adopted it very quickly, and it was a successful rollout.
Awesome, great. Okay. Anything else to add? We can proceed here. So AJ, we have been exploring, rapidly kind of pushing towards some novel technologies in the way we perform and do our work, right? AI in the workplace. Much different. Our work is different than what you do in yours, right? As far as like making drug substance and the things that human patients will use. Ours is more about getting projects designed, implemented, and deployed, right? What has your experience been seeing and working with that as we roll and introduce that kind of change into our organization?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's fun. It's something new. I think there used to be a perception that in order to use AI at work, you have to have, I don't know, like some big glowing ball in the back room that speaks to you and tells you how to do everything. And that's not real. And then we kind of overcorrected and everybody was like thinking about ChatGPT and assuming that what we were doing is just putting a PDF of a batch record in ChatGPT and hoping that it approves it correctly and things like that. And what we're doing at Rovisys right now is way more grounded, I think. It's way more structured, and I think that's where things have to go. And it's certainly where things are right now. Like carving up what you're doing into individual, basically a work breakdown structure, into individual components and saying, which of these things need me to do them, which of these things need me to review them, and which of these things I can just trust that a system can do automatically. And then we basically do a risk-based approach, a GAMP5 approach to our own work, and send those minor, unimportant tasks over to AI. And that's us, but there are things that, I think everyone can do there as well. We talk about people using GPT or Claude to write an email or something, but it gets more deep than that. You can certainly have, all of these A1 tools, or any of the enterprise integration level tools that we talked about earlier, do a lot of your menial tasks, not just emails. It goes deeper. It goes to, I need to write a report, or I need to create a CapEx request for my next big MES project. All of those are things that you don't have to bear the full burden of anymore.
Good. One of the points you made, we break the work down into the small components and the steps that it takes, right? I think we've heard that in a number of cases here, and I'm curious from your perspectives, whether or not you've applied AI, right? I imagine you see benefit when the system that your people are going to follow is organized so that they know how to best use the technology that's implemented for them. Is that what you've experienced, and how far have you seen that kind of reach? I'm going to ask you both for you.
So for us, we're in the early stages, kind of on the journey of AI within the GMP space. I think as an industry, there's a lot to learn about what is there. Obviously, right now, everything is very human in the loop. Nothing is trusted right off the bat. But I think we're in an interesting stage here where there's a lot of what I'll call AI fatigue from on the floor, where we're really pushing, this is where AI is going, this is where it's there. But at the end of the day, the operations team is still doing the paperwork, the hard work, the manual labor. They're not seeing that. So we're getting to that point where when you start implementing it, then they can see the results come back, is where we'll really see it kick off. So we're excited to kind of start that on our own here, but we're not fully moved into the AI space. We're doing our kind of due diligence to make sure that it meets our standards as well as regulation standards before we go and move it, but we're close. So having that kind of trust within the team, and then the realization of, wow, I didn't realize that I was taking this much time doing this, of what was my normal day-to-day job for the last 2 years. It just feels routine, it feels normal, and being able to implement that to kind of bury those tasks.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think the way I like to think about it is agentic process automation, right? Is the kind of the direction that this is going, but it's very difficult to automate a process you can't manually follow, right? So I think that founding and starting point to make sure what you're doing makes a lot of sense, right? So kind of back to you, you've started, your journey is going. The myth that if it's not big, it doesn't matter, right? I'm kind of curious if you can speak to some of the benefit of the outcomes that you've seen, even though it's been a relatively, small initiative that you've started with.
Yeah, I think the big thing with starting slow and narrow, right, is really was for us, that was the success, was getting the end users behind it. I know I've said it over and over again, but you can't be successful if everyone's pushing against what you deployed. So having that team there, ready to go, starts out small. They've already started to see the speed that they've gained from it, more effectiveness of the workflows, and then now being able to take data that was normally within a logbook that you had to go search for, and being able to use that data to trend, to move forward. So not just the teams that are using the execution system, but the cross-functional teams that are responsible for the data that comes through that. Or in an investigation team, if something happens, instead of them having to go to an archival room to find a logbook that was archived, now they're in the system, the data's there, they know exactly what happened, what product was used, and how that impacts it. So it's one small stream, and now you're getting the questions of, I have to go look at these often. Can we make this one a digital system? Can we move this one into a digital system? So it's the excitement from not just the teams using it, but the cross-functional groups that are also responsible for that.
Right. Okay.
I will add to that if I can. I think we see a lot of fatigue. I've talked to operators and things like that, and they will say, it's great. We would love this giant EBR system, but they kind of in the back of their heads know that it's a massive project, and they know that there's not funding for it this year, and they know that it's not going to happen. And as we break down what we're doing into those narrow slices, like you said, we say, we can get this done. We will get this done. It'll be 6 months, and you'll have this. They get really excited about getting something done and having something new come along, and it encourages them to believe, I think, that not only will this get done, but the next thing will get done, the next thing will get done, and it will keep flowing.
Yeah, I think a good point on that too is we look at things as a digital transformation, and when you say transformation, I think it's always big picture of a huge transformation. But one small transformation is how you get to that big transformation. You can't do everything all at once. You have to take it in bite-sized pieces that you can be successful with.
Great. Good perspective. Anything that you want to add in, Isabelle?
Yeah, if I look back at our journey, like right now, our most successful use case are the logbooks. So it's everything that you guys have said. I think our journey with electronic batch records is mixed at the moment. There is a lot of excitement around AI, again, that new shiny thing, right? But there's also managing expectations. They think it'll just fix everything. It's like, no, the way you're doing things is not going to automatically translate and be fixed by AI. I think you have to think this through first. So kind of with like logbooks, but also even AI use cases, I think you have to talk with your business partners to make sure you really understand what problem they're trying to solve. Because if they go in being like, AI will fix my life, it won't. So, or at least if you don't have an idea of how you want it to work for you, I don't think you'll have a success story there.
Great. Okay, I think we're at time. Is that right? Yes. Yeah. Great.
All right. We've got maybe time for one question. All right.
I'm curious how you're addressing the cloud with both being apprentice users. Do you have any redundancy for the shop floor execution, or are you just okay with relying that to interface with your whatever you have at the factory?
I couldn't quite hear.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Are you okay with
either.
cloud on the manufacturing floor? Is that the question?
Yeah, are you using the solution for anything with integrated with the floor that could be disrupted with a cloud disconnect?
Cloud interruptions from that reliance on,
Gotcha.
Any risks around those?
It's a risk. It's real. Experienced it. So I think what's key, again, it's planning. Like what are you going to do when it happens, not if. Obviously, you do your best to engineer out those risks, mitigate it, right? But it's real. So just figure out what you're going to do with that ahead of time. That being said, those instances have been rare, right? So, I think back to a time when with different MESs, you're like, something is down. What is it? Oh, it's this one service on that one server, and it's only on that server, but you got to restart it on like all 5 servers, right? So far with the cloud implementation, I haven't had any of those issues. So although the case that you might have issues with AWS or whatever your cloud provider is, the probability of it occurring is low, but it can happen. So just make sure you talk through what you're going to do to save your batch in the event that it happens, right? Business continuity.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. The risk is real, but it's no more real than the risk that you used to have with your legacy system on-prem. One of my customers recently had a goose fly into the power lines, and we lost everything for 2 days. AWS wasn't out for that long last time it went out.
Good.
Oh, a goose.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Give our panelists a round of applause, please.